In this video, I will provide you with two different house framing projects. So let's go ahead and get started with our first home, where we will be building some type of a livable area or storage area over a two-car garage. And in this example here, we are going to put a 4-12 hip roof on it, along with a balcony. This balcony is going to be 4 foot and then run the length of the building. And I'm also going to provide a couple of examples for installing shear walls. That would be a common thing to do on the front of a garage, especially when you have a 20-foot wide building and a 16-foot garage door opening. And let's go ahead and quickly take this building apart here. Get rid of the roof, ceiling, joist, walls, floor sheathing, and then the joist, so that we can take a look at the foundation and get a better idea at how the structural shear panel will work. And in this video, I went ahead and widened the wall here to make it a 2x6 wall so that I could install some 4x6 on each side here, along with some large hold downs. And for my newer viewers, I am not a structural engineer, and that means that you might need to check with a structural engineer to validate any of the information in this video. And I'm going to provide you with two different methods here for building the shear wall. On the first one, I went ahead and cut the plate here a little shorter so that I could install the shear panel and have it run through the framing like I've done here. And on the other side, I'm going to run this plate through, and you'll see that here in a few seconds. Let's go ahead and take a look at the hold downs and how they go into the concrete with some extremely large anchor bolts there. And I know some of you are thinking, why do we need 2 anchor bolts here when we have the hold downs here? And I got you, but the anchor bolts are usually going to be required, even though they might not make any sense. And of course, here you can see where I stopped the framing plate here and then ran this plate through and installed the 4x6 on top of this framing plate in this wall here. And if you're wondering which one is going to be better, I don't really think it's going to matter either way. However, if you have to notch around it, then you might not be getting the nailing you need into the bottom plate like we have in the other example. And of course, you can install the shear panel and the framing stud over the shear panel. And I would strongly suggest avoiding to install both of the pieces of shear panel on each side of the wall until after you've got your framing inspection. And of course, the reasoning for that will be that the inspector will need to look at the hold downs. And if the garage needs to be insulated, then the inspector will need to see the insulation also. Next up, we went ahead and added a couple of larger footings for the front wall to support the floor framing weight of the balcony. And of course, we needed to add 2 more footings on this side here because we're going to be installing a beam here. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we now need to do to the floor framing. And that's going to look something like this: a large beam going across, supported by a post on each side, and then transferring the weight from above down to the footings, along with switching the direction of the floor joist, and then shaping the front of it there so that we will have a slope on the exterior to drain off any water that could accumulate here. And the slope will be about 1/4 inch per foot. And I do have another video on how to lay out the shape joist, and I will try to put a link here or a link in the video description area. And of course, if I forget, feel free to let me know. And we will need to install blocking in between the floor joist that will sit on top of the wall framing, along with some blocks that will provide us with perimeter nailing on the deck or for the deck sheathing. Another view of the blocks there. Go ahead and pan out to take a look at our double row of blocks along with our hangers. And something that I noticed here is that I didn't install any blocks like I did over here underneath the one wall that's going to be running in this direction. So keep that in mind to make sure that you install a double joist or blocking like we did in the floor for any walls that are going to be running parallel to the floor joist in your floor framing. So another view of the bottom there with our beams sitting on top of the post and of course our shear panel. And if you're going to be drywalling this area, make sure that you add some type of furring strips to create a nice flat wall. Next up, let's go ahead and install our floor sheathing to provide you with a view of the drop down here. And ours is going to be about 1.5 inches. We have 1 1/8" sheathing on the balcony and on the floor. You can always use smaller sheathing. And of course, the floor sheathing will need to switch directions in this area here and over the balcony so that the floor sheathing is installed perpendicular to the joist. And of course, here are the blocks I was talking about that probably need to be installed over here somewhere. And you can get a better view of that right here. Here's the wall I'm talking about that might need some blocks underneath it like we have over here to support this wall. And with our second floor sheathing, let's go ahead and provide you with another view of how we're going to have a step down here. And this step down is usually going to provide you with a nice way to waterproof and separate the balcony deck from the floor. And I believe I have other videos on that already made. And our balcony is going to be sticking out 4 feet, and then we're going to be going back 8 feet to provide us with a 1/3 cantilever. However, keep in mind that I have seen building codes that are requiring 1/4, which means that if I was going to have 4 feet here, that I would need to go back 12 feet and use 16-foot long joist. And if our ceiling joist looks complicated, that's because of our hip roof. And if you watch some of our other videos, you might have noticed where I used pressure blocks instead of joist hangers. And since the span here isn't very long, we can use 2x4s and butt them into a double 2x6. And then of course we are going to need to notch underneath the hip rafter. Now in this video, I'm going to be using a 2x10 hip and 2x6 rafters. However, you might be better off using double 2x8s for your hip or even a 4x8. And if you remember in one of the other videos, I suggested installing a beam here to reduce the span for the ceiling joist so that we could use smaller lumber. And again, we're using 2x6 here. However, on the longer spans, you might need to use 2x8 or even 2x10s. And one of our viewers suggested putting the crawl space access hole in the closet here. And that would have worked on that particular video. However, if I put the crawl space in here, I might not have the required minimum distance to access the attic. So I went ahead and moved it into the bedroom. And like I said earlier, if I was using a different roof pitch, something that was going to be a little steeper, then I could put the crawl space in the closets and keep it out of the bedroom here. And let's not forget, if I was going to move the access into the closet, that I might need to move it a little further away to allow for the shelving in here, or reduce the length of the shelving, which again is going to create design problems that you might not want to be dealing with. Next up, let's go ahead and install mid-span blocks in the ceiling joist. And we could always install blocks over all of the wall framing to provide us with a sturdier ceiling. And of course, I moved the blocks over a little bit to install them in the center of the distance from here to here in this section of the ceiling. And then the beam will be sitting on top of the corner of this wall and then on top of the closet wall here, or the wall that will divide the closet in between the kitchen and the closet. And again, on all 4 corners, we're going to be notching this ceiling joist for the hip. And then let's not forget all of our ceiling backing for the drywall. Pan out there. Next up, let's go ahead and install our hip roof. Again, 2x10 hips, 2x6 roof rafters, and 2x8 fascia board. And again, the roof pitch is going to be 4 and 12, or about 18.5 degrees. And this is about the only spot I can install some type of a support underneath the ridge, even though I could come off of this wall and add some supports for these 2 hips. However, it's not going to be as easy to do it on the other side. And I also want to point out that you might want to install a larger door header here. And of course, this provides you with a better view of how this support is actually encroaching on the area over the door opening. So another thing to think about. Then take a look at how our seat cuts and our blocking will be working. Along with the ceiling joist, we're going to need to notch the top of the ceiling joist, since we're going to be using 2x6 for our rafters and for our joist. And of course, you wouldn't need to do this if you were using 2x8 for your roof rafters. And of course, the slope of the roof could also affect that. And on our hip roof, we are going to have a couple of rafters here. You're thinking like, wait a minute, what are these guys doing here? And these are basically just providing you with a little more support for the roof sheathing and to continue with our 16-inch on center layout. And of course, we will need to cut some funky blocks here in the corner. And now let's go ahead and take a look at a view from the other side. And then of course, a view of why we needed to notch the joist here. And again, you might not need to notch the joist if you're going to use smaller hip rafters. And for those of you wondering why I didn't use smaller hip rafters, that's because I've already made plenty of videos like that. However, I haven't made one like this to provide you with an example of how much area here you're going to have that will not be supported, suggesting that a 2x12 might be out of the question. And of course, a view of our corner drywall blocks. These blocks will be used to provide nailing for the ceiling drywall. Next up, let's just go ahead and pan out, take a view of the ceiling from what it might look like from below. Again, give us a view of the backing for the drywall, along with our ridge support and our blocking that might need to be notched over the drywall backing. Next up, let's head over to the bathroom to get a view of how all of this is going to connect together. And you can see here where the beam is sitting on top of the corner of the wall framing. Next up, let's head over to the other side. And all four corners of this building will be framed the same way, or should I say framed the same way with very little modifications. A view of the hip and how it planes into the ridge and the roof rafters that are spaced 16 inches on center in both directions. Next up, let's go ahead and install our roof sheathing and start wrapping this video up. And let's not forget that some engineers require a 24-inch minimum in both directions, this way and in this way, for your roof sheathing. And if that's the case, then you're going to need to spend a few more dollars to modify this area here. So again, another thing to consider if you're going to be building a project like this. And a view from the bottom here so you can see how the blocking is going to work out and how the bottom of the overhang might look on your project. And again, I like to say might look because who knows, yours might look a little different. But that's what these videos are here for, to give you ideas. Next up, let's go ahead and take a look at another house with a long front porch and a rear laundry room with a gable roof. And not too difficult. And I believe it has about an 8 and 12 roof pitch with a fairly straightforward building foundation. I'm not going to put any rebar in here. And I'm also not going to spend a lot of time on certain parts of the construction, including the building foundation. So you can see here where we have the concrete slab and the porch slab with the footings. So here we have a single-story house, a living room, kitchen, laundry room in the back, one bathroom, and two bedrooms with a closet located in the hallway and a closet in each bedroom. So let's go ahead and take a look at the front here where we have a window and an entrance door along with a 2-inch step down between the top of the interior foundation and our porch. 2 inches is a common measurement, even though I'm starting to see building codes that are suggesting that this needs to be a little smaller. And I actually noticed that on one of the videos I did for a stair landing. Next up, since we are going to have a truss roof, you might need to install 1x4s here instead of 2x4s for your top plates. And I've been getting a lot of slack for this. Some people are saying, oh, I don't do that. Well, I've never came across a project where we didn't do it. So make sure you check with the truss manufacturer, because I'm not about to suggest that this is the only way to build this, but I am suggesting that it's the only way I have ever done it. And the reason for doing this is to provide a little bit of leeway just in case the truss roof needs to settle down a little bit lower. than what would be provided if we used a 2x4. Next up, we have a bedroom closet, and then our bathroom door, along with a bedroom door, closet door, and another bedroom door over here. Another view of it there, along with our closet in the other bedroom. And then another area here that could actually be used for a forced air heating and cooling unit if needed. Bathroom with a window that's high enough to be placed over our bathtub and shower combination unit. Another thing that you don't want to forget about. Next up, let's go ahead and pan out a little bit, take a look at the laundry room, back door to the house, and then of course this could be a door or an opening going into the laundry room. And it's not uncommon to see a door here that closes so that it can be shut to reduce any unwanted noise coming out of the laundry room and then kind of going through the house. And a couple of windows and an upper view. Next up, let's go ahead and install our trusses. Now, we're not going to install the porch roof yet or the back roof, or should I say we're not going to connect it to the building yet until after we have installed our trusses. And you can see here where the ceiling on the porch will be lapping through. It will be tying into and connecting to each one of the roof trusses to provide us with a nice structural tie running all the way through to the front of the building. Now keep in mind that in our example, our trusses and our ceiling joists are spaced 24 inches on center. And if for whatever reason you need to shorten the spacing, then you can do that. Our porch beams, along with our posts, sitting on top of our base connectors and our concrete footings. Next up, let's take a look at the shaped blocks so that we can get some good roof sheathing nailing. And I would imagine at least 6 16D nails, if not a few more, to create a nice connection here between the bottom cord on the roof truss and the ceiling joist. Another view of it there. Let's go ahead and take a look at our pressure blocks. And you might need to use joist hangers here. However, I have been providing viewers with something that you might be able to use to save a few dollars, especially if you end up with some scrap lumber that you might not be using. And of course, you can install the rear gable trusses. Just don't install anything more until you have installed the roof sheathing and nailed it. Then we can go ahead and add our fill section later. And you don't have to build it in the order that I am providing you with. Just don't forget some of the information that I have provided you with, because the last thing I want to see you do is make any type of mistake that's going to cost you money. And of course, you will need to install ceiling backing for the drywall, and that can be done a variety of different ways, along with an access hole into the attic. And in a project like this, you might be able to make the access hole a little larger so that you can install a heating and cooling system in the attic. Another thing that you will definitely want to work out during the design phase. And of course, more backing here. We just nailed that backing to the truss. And this piece of backing was nailed flat onto the top of the framing plate. Again, providing you with another option to think about when building or designing your house. Next up, let's go ahead and install our fascia board, including all of the valley fill blocks like we have here. Definitely going to need one on each side, one over here. And the fascia board here is going to be plumb or vertically level fascia board, not square off of the rafters. And after we have done that, we can go ahead and install our roof sheathing. And for those of you paying attention, you can see where we have some ventilation holes here. And you might need to install a few more. They might need to be larger, or you might be able to make smaller ones and maybe more of them. But the last thing you want to do is cut a large hole and affect the integrity of the roof sheathing or the structural integrity. So let's not get carried away here. And another thing your structural engineer can specify on the building plans if they haven't already. Next up, let's go ahead and install our patio or our porch roof. And you can see why we needed to wait until we installed the roof sheathing. So not too difficult. Next up, let's install our fascia board around the porch, and then our roof roof sheathing. Then let's take a look at the side here. I needed to rebuild this area a little different to get everything to work out how I wanted it to. However, your project might not require this type of design at the end of the porch. Next up, let's go ahead and head to the back. Take a look at our ventilation hole and access hole that we might need so that we can access this area here. Otherwise, we're going to need to install another access hole in this area, and that might not be that big of a deal considering it's just a laundry room. However, if you do not install an access hole, you still might need a couple of holes for ventilation to allow air to circulate between the attic over here and the attic over here. More things to think about when you're designing and building. Next up, let's go ahead and install the fill. And you can see here where the truss company has provided us with roof trusses so that we don't need to make our own fill, and hopefully the fill rafters work. I say hopefully because most of the time they didn't when I worked years ago. Then we'll go ahead and install the roof sheathing, and we are done with this project. So there you have two homes that might give you some ideas for building your own home. And thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, let us know by hitting the thumbs up button or letting us know in the comment area.